Good morning, everyone. This is a reading written by Rick Bernard. I was asked to talk about a personal philosophy I expressed to a couple of people at coffee hour. I'm not sure how valuable it is to others, but it is valuable to me. I think about how fast our personal life changes and how quickly new information streams at us. It's probably only rivaled by the constantly increasing rate of worldwide information flowing at us. We all want to be good at managing what we learn, but how do we apply it? Our 7 principles are laudable, but trying to live them is a whole other thing. On top of all of this, we have personal realities. Spouses, partners, lovers, parents, children, extended families, friends, enemies, and community all bring their joys and sorrows to our hearts and minds. Then there are our inner demons and angels, our own strengths and weaknesses, our own cycles, our own successes and tragedies. Pressure, challenge, and confusion comes from changing directions and varying times. How do we cope? Cliches and taking a broad view can help. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all others. Think globally, but act locally. Look at history and realize there were no good old days. Everything happens for a reason. Shower the people you love with love. This kind of thinking helps, but it's not near enough. Nothing moves in a straight line. Progress and retreat are always with us. I use concentric circles. I am the center. The circles expand and the circles contract. The smallest circle only includes me. As soon as I am healthy and strong enough, I expand my circle to include my wife, Cindy. I do what I can to help make us both healthy, and as soon as possible, I expand my circle to include our children. Then expand my circle to include my extended family, and then my friends, and then my community, and my town and state, nation, and world. The important thing is to make your circle as large as you can and as quickly as you can. At the same time, take care of yourself. I have cycles, and so does my world. Much of my life I can handle what I consider a pretty inclusive number of circles, and I feel strong and helpful. When it's necessary, I collapse circles and reduce my concerns until I can handle what's in the remaining circles. I have had times when I felt the need to help someone or do something that forces me to exclude other parts of my life. Sometimes I have been so depressed or unhealthy or needy that my circle is only me. I try not to get stuck too long there. I have found that reaching outward and lending a hand is the one thing that makes me most healthy. I believe that expanding my circles the best I can and as soon as I can helps me to be the best that I can. In the 60s, I heard Tom Rush sing, "Don't confront me with failures. I have not forgotten them." I've since had lots of failures. I forgive myself for them. I try to overcome them, protect my concentric circles from the fallout from them, but I never forget them. I also have had lots of accomplishments. I try to learn from them, build on them, and share them in my concentric circles. Our 7 principles are a good life guide. Try to use them. Reach out. Make your circles as big as you can. Collapse them when you must, and forgive yourself when you do. And that was by Rick Bernard.
Family relations provide many examples of connection. The psychologist Paul Pearsall put it this way: the family is a soul center and the apex of spiritual energy. It is the place where we learn what everything means and how to make everything meaningful. Eddie Priest will now speak to us about what he has learned from his relationship with his dad and his family.
My wife Andrea's parents, Tina and Tony Mendoza, were married for 66 years and had 2 children, a son, Anthony, and a daughter, Andrea. I'm so thankful for Tina and Tony for through their example, which is a key word here, through their example, and her wonderful extended family of grandparents and aunts and uncles. They gave a great start in helping Andrea to be the wonderful person that we all know and love. Andrea has so many great qualities. She's loving, kind, giving, open, intelligent, fun, patient, forgiving, artistic, musical, adventurous. She has a facility with languages, is a natural, quiet leader, humble, has a marvelous sense of humor, and has the focus and organizational skills that I very much lack. Andrea has made me a better man, and she makes me strive to be an even better husband and father. We have 2 wonderful children, Christopher and Gabriella, and they both have been very enriched by our example of our shared love. Gab and Chris have many of the combined traits and qualities that Andrea and I have. My parents, Harold and Cecilia Priest, were also married for 66 years. They had 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls, with a 26-year span between the youngest and the oldest. My parents were always very supportive and dedicated to each one of us, and were always there for us through good times and bad. A week from tomorrow marks the 28th anniversary of my brother Linwood's death due to complications from AIDS. My parents moved to Florida for Linwood's last year of life to be with him and to help him. When my dad telephoned me from Florida to tell us that Linwood had just died, I asked him if I could include in the obituary that my brother had pre-written for himself and given to me that he had died from AIDS. I knew that our father was uncomfortable with announcing that in the newspapers. This was in the very, very early days. After a moment of silence, he asked me gently if that was what Linwood wanted. I answered yes, and he told me softly, then include it. Another example of my family's lives being enriched by my parents' strong love and example. When I was 12 years old, my father shared with me a short quote he had just read in Reader's Digest. The best thing that a father can do for his kids is to love their mother. Dad and Mom certainly preached this by example. My parents were the romantic couple, showing us by their daily displays of affection that they didn't just love one another, but were in love with each other. This past September, we welcomed a new family member when our daughter Gabriella married a wonderful man, Arthur. Arthur was our guest pianist here on Christmas Eve. Gab and Arthur's wedding day happened to fall on the 67th wedding anniversary of Arthur's grandparents, who are still alive and were there with us to celebrate Gab and Arthur's wedding, the concentric circles. Once again, continuing to enrich our family by their example. And now to close. For many years during the Christmas season, Andrea, Gab, Chris, and I had a tradition of watching the movie It's a Wonderful Life together. At the end of the movie, after George Bailey had just experienced just how much his friends, family, and town loved him, his brother Harry toasts George as the richest man in town. This is how I feel about myself when I think about my family.
Different families teach us different lessons. We learn in many ways. Now, Linda Thompson is going to share with us about what she learned from her daughter.
A mother's love. My mother was not the warm, cuddly, supportive, loving mother we all wish we had. My mother was rather cold, distant, and withdrawn, doing what she knew she had to do as a mother, but with no real enthusiasm for the job. When I got married, I did so with the intention of being a loving wife, a professional woman, with no real plans of being a mother. My mother had not seemed to enjoy the job, so it was not my goal to take it on. Brad and I really had not talked about the what if. However, in a year or so, I discovered I was going to be a mother sooner than I expected. So, goodbye, professional teacher for now. We're on to motherhood. I hoped and prayed I would enjoy the job more than my mother had. I was so unprepared. I had no idea what it was going to be like. My mother had never shared anything about having a baby, how to take care of her, or what it felt like. Her only comments were, "You'll find out." I was unprepared for the emotion that came immediately when I saw and held Luann. She was wonderful, perfect, and had no idea how inexperienced I was. She looked at me as if I knew what to do and trusted me. I was afraid to bathe her, leave her asleep in the bassinet, or even feed her. Her umbilical cord terrified me. I hoped she never guessed how new everything was for me. I only knew I loved her from the very first minute for the rest of her life. I marveled at every new thing she learned as she grew. She was amazing, learning everything easily and quickly. I vowed early on my daughter would never doubt how much I loved her and would never feel she had to find out everything on her own. I would be her teacher. First babies are the experimental models for all the kids you have. I always felt badly for people who only had one child. Each child brings their own joy to your life. A mother's joy grows with each child she has. It expands. I had 2 more daughters to learn from and to teach. Luann grew to be the typical first child. She was a rule follower, the one to do everything first and to do it well. My heart grew with more love with each new thing she attempted. She deserved as much love as I could give her. I always hoped she felt loved and realized how much more she got from me than I was ever given. I hoped she would pass it along. I discovered a mother's job is never done. She eventually graduated college, fell in love, married, and moved out with our blessings. In time, she had children, and I watched her become a mother with more assurance than I had ever felt. She was an incredible mother, doing her best to be the mother her children deserved. She excelled at raising self-assured, confident children who would become independent people. When her oldest child was 4, she found out she had breast cancer. How devastating to all of us. She and they and her devoted husband lived with it, lived with cancer, not dying from cancer. Her children never really knew her to be healthy. She never let on her pain or suffering to them, though. They lived with it too, for 11 years. She felt her duty was to raise her children with love, not living with the constant threat of losing her. Her 3 children are independent, well-loved people all these years later. They knew a mother's love. It is a lasting legacy that only a few really experience fully. If a mother's love could have kept her here, she would be here still. I think of her every day.
And now Cheryl McQueen is going to share with us about her grandchildren from her 2 daughters.
It's an obstacle course up here. Mark and I have young grandchildren and one 25-year-old step-grandson. We see Patrick, our step-grandson, occasionally throughout the year. He's in the area, but busy with his adult life. The young ones, 4, 7, and 8, we see weekly. When our first daughter, Lauren, was born, we lived in Michigan. My parents were in Connecticut. Mark's were in Massachusetts. We were lucky to see them once a year. A couple of years later, Mark was promoted, and we relocated to Massachusetts. Heather was born in Middleboro, so visits from and to grandparents were easier and more frequent. When we got together, the joy our parents and our kids exhibited was obvious. We help our daughters and son-in-laws by babysitting 1 day a week for each family. The where and how it all happens varies, but it works for all of us. The kids are fun, loving, full of energy, and drive us crazy sometimes. A train set is often set up on our dining room table, although currently it is in the floor of our office. Magna tile projects cover a quarter of our living room floor sometimes. Maybe the piano is being played, stories are being read. A walk around the block, or to church to pick up Mark's mail, or to the library. Some days, all of the above. When the herring are running, we're at the river each time the kids are here. Mark and I often have pizza for dinner after they've been with us because we're tired. When we get Amia off her school bus, we go to her home. She knows I'm allergic to cats, and she efficiently picks them up and puts them in the bedroom and shuts the door. Snack time, often a little bit of TV, is in order. In nice weather, a walk is an option, or playing in their yard, sometimes with other kids. Phoebe calls us up. Elliot often wants to talk, thus driving Phoebe crazy. Amia tells us her news during the car ride from her bus stop to her house. Like her mother, she's a fast talker, but the ride does take about 15 minutes. We are happy to be the sounding boards, the adults whose lap they choose to sit on, the person who takes a walk or pushes them on a swing or catches them at the end of the slide, takes them to the library or on a nature walk. We have the time, and I'm thrilled to share it with them. I think it is important for kids to have adults besides their parents who are willing to listen to them, ask them questions, show them that they are important, acknowledging their joy, and perhaps more important, their frustrations, lets them know that they are seen, heard, and loved. Vi asked me what I get out of all this. Pleasure, exhaustion, laughter, exercise, the ability to really know these wonderful young people, and perhaps have a positive influence on their lives. And there is also a gladness to be able to help our own daughters and their husbands.
The cultural observer, Letty Pogrebin, wrote that from rocking horse to rocking chair, friendship keeps teaching us about being human. My mother's 85-year relationship with her friend Helen certainly showed this to me. Making and keeping friends is a spiritual challenge that can bring forth the best that is in us and make the journey a lot sweeter. When my mother passed, her friend put a flower in her coffin with the note, "Save a place for me right now." Now, Doreen Levesser will tell us, I always call her just Doreen, will now tell us about her friendship.
Good morning. First of all, I want to say that I've been blessed throughout my life with amazing friends, including many of you in this room, who have enriched my life and strengthened me in countless ways. But when I was asked to participate in this morning's service, you, my dearest Denise, are the first person who came to mind. I am overjoyed that you are joining us today from your home in New Haven, Connecticut. When my mother was planning my 3rd birthday party, she sent my older brothers out into the neighborhood to find other children my age to invite to our backyard party. One of those girls was Denise, who lived just a few houses down on the other side of the street, Ellis Avenue in Lowell, Mass., a neighborhood that was filled with baby boomers, families, and lots of kid activity. We were some of the few French-Canadian families that lived in this mostly Irish Catholic neighborhood, and 2 of the kids who eventually went to the Catholic school run by a French-Canadian order of nuns. There were probably about half a dozen of us from Ellis Avenue who attended Saint Jean d'Arc, and we walked to school every day, boys on one side of the street, girls on the other. And as we walked that half mile to school, we collected others along the way. Denise and I spent almost all our free time together, along with another Denise and an Anne from our street. We went to kindergarten together, celebrated our first Holy Communion and confirmation together, attended elementary school, St. Joseph's Girls High School, and Boston University together. We were roommates in college for our first 3 years with connecting rooms in senior year. We weren't exactly joined at the hip, but pretty close. We celebrated all our birthdays together, gave each other surprise parties, stood up for each other at our weddings, shared the births of our children, and so very many joys and sorrows together. All along the way, we had different interests, different subgroups of friends, different activities, and eventually lived in different cities, following different paths. Growing up, she was the pink girl. I was the athlete, or, as we used to say in those days, the tomboy. She was the delicate princess with a steel interior, and I was the rough and tumble kid with a very sensitive and easily hurt soul who had to survive having 3 pain-in-the-neck brothers. Summer mornings found me at her door calling, "Denise." That's what we did in those days. So funny to think about that now. And in those younger days, I called her mother and father by their first names, Ruby and Louie. I don't know why, because later on I would never have done that and always call them Mr. and Mrs. Her parents were there for me too, solid and loving and supportive. I'll never forget our New York trip with her dad, who was a buyer of women's clothes for Cherry and Webb department store in Lowell, and later Grover Cronin in Waltham, and was one of the kindest, most joyful men one could ever know. He sure showed us the time, and we did it all, running him ragged. One highlight, and there were many, was sharing our hotel elevator with the Dave Clark 5. We were 15 going on 16 and played it ever so cool, never once batting an eye or even asking for an autograph. We weren't those kids. After college, she went to graduate school at Case Western in Cleveland, and I was trying to survive in 1971 with a BA in sociology, first as a receptionist at a YWCA, then a clerk at Boston State College, until I tumbled into the job that was just right for me. A union organizer, a paid rabble-rouser, working, organizing, and fighting for rights on the job, especially for women office workers. A job steeped in working for justice and dignity for working people. When Denise first left Boston, I missed her like I'd missed my right arm, but I learned to survive. I had to. And over the years, somehow, we were always together in some way, in spirit and otherwise. My heart and soul are filled with a million snapshots and sweet memories, especially of times with our children. She taught me so much about being a parent. For her 40th birthday, I gave her a small anchor on a pendant because for me, she was my anchor to who I was and who I am today. Always on each other's minds, in each other's hearts. I spent last Saturday with Denise and her grandchild she never thought she'd have. And it was joyous and magical and beyond special. She's named for Denise's mother, Ruby, who was herself an amazing woman with depths you could only guess at and, if very lucky, touch. Denise is in so many, many ways a perfect combination of Ruby and Louie, lifelong friends, spouses, and lovers. I could call Denise right now, and she'd answer as she always does, "Mademoiselle Dorine, comment ça flip?" And somehow, though the two names aren't necessarily similar, very often people will call me Denise and her Dorine, people the other has never met and sometimes perfect strangers to us. Crazy. And so connected in the way that only friends of more than 70 years can be. When I told her last week that she would be the person I'd talk about today, she said, "There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of you," and I her. I love you and honor you, Denise, and hold you in my heart forever.